Welcome to Flyover Conservative Podcast with David and Stacy Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Flyover Conservatives with David and Stacy Whited.
Hey!
And we have a special treat for you guys today. I'm going to give you a little bit of some housekeeping rules, but this is going to be a little different than anything you've seen from us in the past. This is going to be information you're going to want to share. It's available on every different type of podcast format now, from Spotify to Apple, YouTube, however you like to consume your data. You're going to want to get this information to people who like to consume data. We're at a pivotal point in history, and we have somebody for you today that would be the closest thing I could think of to providing you insider baseball information. This would be like talking to insider person with your favorite sports team, and just getting insights into things that you might not typically have access to, information that may not necessarily be on the scroller bar at the bottom of the major news networks, but things that are very relevant in our world today, things that have been talked about for months in the past, and things that are going to be playing a role in the weeks to come. Now, a couple of things for heads up. Because of the world we live in and the kind of scrutiny information that's shared is given, there might be terms that will be veiled, that might be, not shared with the exact same. They might be slightly encoded. So I encourage you to be an intelligent listener, to be a mature listener, to be awake and alert. Get your notebook out, take some notes. Let this be a launching pad into your own research to become a more intelligent American, okay? A participant in our liberties and freedoms.
That's really good.
And take some ownership of the information that you're going to receive, and let it be an additional thing in your repertoire. If something challenges you, dig into it. This is not just to sit and receive and be entertained. This is we're co-laboring with you to bring you the best information humanly possible, so you're aware of what's going on in our world, what's going on around you, sometimes in the scene, sometimes behind the scenes of what you don't even see. So with that, I'm excited to welcome on author, entrepreneur, consultant, and somebody that's been deeply involved in the intelligence community, and just kind of been at the right place at the right time through some important moments in history. And welcome to Flyover Conservatives, flyover.com, Juan Savin. Juan, thank you for being on here with us today.
Welcome, Juan.
Thank you. That was a
So
very
glad
nice
you're
intro.
on.
Well,
We appreciate you. For those of you that have not read Juan's book, give you a place to get that, and we'll reference it. It'll be pictured here below, as well as key information he references here. If there's sites and things, we'll put it in the notes below. You go to gumroad.com, gumroad.com, and you can pick up his book called Kid by the Side of the Road. That's sort of his labor of love of accumulating some of these great ideas and then putting them out there in almost a prophetic way this past year. So you're going to want to grab that, get an e-version, get the actual download, but check out the book. I think by the time we're done, you're going to want to know everything that he knows.
Definitely. No doubt about it.
well, it's
Juan,
very,
it
very
looks like you're right in the center of it. I see out your window. You're in the nation's capital. You're in the belly of the beast. Tell us what's going on.
Well, of course, we've observed the inauguration ceremony today. This acquisition of power by the person of Joe Biden. And when a president takes power, it's not just the individual, it's all the people that come with them. It's a change of command at a lot more levels than just the presidency. All of the department heads end up oftentimes changing that cabinet, the advisors, how they interact with and view and deal with the rest of the world, and deal with the rest of us as a people, as a country. That changing of stance, like leaning one side or the other on your feet. And so we're at this moment where we're observing this transition, handoff of power. It's a very, I would say as a believer, as a Christian, it's a very solemn event, because so much of our life, our livelihood, our way of looking at the world, interacting with the world is pivots off of who is in leadership over us as a country and directions that we take, things that we do as a people, as individuals. Our political leadership has so much influence, impact, control over our lives. And so this handing off of power is an important event at any time. Back to the beginning of time, one of the things that not very many people pay attention to, who was the original builder of cities? You kids know?
Sumerians? I don't know. The Romans did a great job of connecting them. I don't know.
Cain.
Fill us in.
Cain.
Okay.
Cain
Yeah,
was
true.
the one that
Original.
built cities.
Yeah.
And why was he a city builder? Because when you bring people into a city, you can organize, orchestrate, plan. There's a certain interdependency in that city state structure. And you can't function without some certain type of coordination organization. In these modern cities, you stack them and pack them. People think because of the propaganda that's out there that the world is so full of people that there's no room left. The reality is we occupy a very tiny percentage of the land on the planet because we concentrate ourselves at these locations, generally by water, generally by rivers, places where the commerce concentrates. And one of the unique things about America is that we have waterways all across the country. We can be more spread out than a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world. And yet we still have certain places that make more sense for commerce and working from. And so these great metropolises, these centralized locations also make it much easier for us to be owned, controlled, managed in order to work together. There's a certain logic to it. And I will say this, from a biblical perspective, it's not a negative thing. Adam and Eve start in the garden in Genesis, and by the time they get to Revolutions, the children, the offspring, are living in a heavenly city. It's they were given this job of grooming the Garden of Eden and maintaining it and giving it some organization to trim the garden. They weren't just there wandering aimlessly around. Adam, in fact, was arguably the greatest scientist ever lived because he named all the plants and animals.
True.
And he had to understand the world that he was given, and then had to provide some organization, some discipline, some trimming of the garden because it was constantly growing. That was a full-time job. And,
I think what you're saying is going to resonate with everybody in the 17-state area of Flyover conservatives, because I think a lot of them will visit the big cities, but the percentage of people on this podcast today, the lion's share conceal carry. They probably have killed a deer at some point in their life, but they're connected.
Probably have gardens.
And they're connected directly through agriculture, even maybe one or two generations away from from the soil, directly knowing where things come from. And you look at who is considered the coastal elites of these major cities, and I think sometimes there is a big disconnect from someone in New York towards somebody in Missouri, or somebody from Texas towards somebody in LA. There is kind of a disconnect there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in fact, the founding fathers made a very big thing. The states, in arguing over coming into this union, to forming this early union, the thing that became the final straw that allowed for the states to decide to come together and join together was this electoral college, which the reason for that was so that a couple of large city areas where the population was very dense, a couple of states with high density populations couldn't run roughshod over the less developed, less densely populated states. And so there was this electoral college created that allowed that you didn't get run by a couple of cities. President Trump, of course, said back in 2016 when he won, and there was all this weeping and gnashing of teeth that Hillary had won the popular vote, but President Trump had won the electoral college. Well, he ran the race according to the rules. The way that by Hoyle, what was the game? He had to win the electoral college, not just the popular vote. And so allegedly he lost on the popular vote. Hillary won that, but he won the electoral college. A lot of people, in fact, I heard this again the other day from somebody that should have known better, saying we got to get rid of the electoral college. No, we don't.
No.
Otherwise, we folks in flyover country would lose every time. And of course, the cities, what's the deal? A high density area, they want rules that favor them. So, you know, they'll build the subways and tunnels and bridges to access their city, but they won't maintain the road so you can get your farm equipment from one end of the farm to the other. And so you can, you know, drive a Honda to take the kids to school as opposed to having to drive a four-wheel truck with wheels to outer space, right? Because the road's so rough, you can't get from one place to the other. And all your taxes go to serve their needs, not yours, because they have the numbers, you know. Democracy, we're not a democracy, we're a representative republic based on national laws. And what's the difference between a republic and a democracy? A democracy is three people in an elevator, two men and one woman. And one of the guys raises his hand and says, you know, I think we need to make a law that it's okay for the men to rape the women. And the woman raises her hand and says, I don't like that law and I vote against it. And the other guy says, well, I vote for it, 2 against 1. I mean, this is a fair election.
Well, throughout a lot of human history, that's how the world was run. Might made right. Whoever's got a bigger baseball bat or whatever,
very true,
it could take over and be in charge.
Well, and that's the whole point. We have to have laws to protect us. Now, I will say this. We are right now at this second engaged in a huge conflict as a country. Great drama has taken us as a country. A few states that violated their own rules for how to change the rules prior to an election in order to favor getting a particular candidate, particular party in power. They changed the rules at the last second for how the votes were counted and ballots were sent out and how they were weighted or given value of looking at the signatures, things like that. And so a few people in just a handful of places were able to change that. And suddenly the vote of the whole country has been arguably flipped because of those handful of states. And because they have enough power within their realm to do it, the fate of the nation and ultimately the fate of the world in many ways has pivoted off the decisions and the strength, the momentum of a handful of players in a few flip states. And the question is, I think at this point in time, we have to be very careful how we say it within most platforms, but there is a question that needs to be resolved that is not resolved, even in a legal sense yet, as to whether or not the count on the votes has been done lawfully, whether it's accurate, you know, whether something has happened that has stolen the election. I will tell you that within the electronic data that I personally am privy to, it's very clear that there is a room for some further analysis in an official setting in order to ascertain what just happened. And the real question that we have as a people, as a nation, as citizens, as Christians, as parents and grandparents, the real question we have right now is, if the bank robbers come into the bank, hold the gun to the teller's head, the guard, the people, and they steal all the money out of the bank. And if they get out the doors and get to the getaway car and get around the corner without being stopped, do we have to let them go because they got off the bank property fair and square?
That's a great
and so, you know, or is there something that has to happen? The scripture that applies, who will be valiant for justice sake? It's interesting, you know, when you say for justice sake, is that mean for your mom? Does that mean so you get a bigger stake? Is that because it's all about your family or somebody else's family? What if you don't have anything to gain either way? No, for justice sake all by itself, just to do the right thing. Has the right thing been done so far? Is there still time to unwind something that for all the world seems like a fait accompli? It's done, it's over, there's nothing you can do about it. They've got the money, they got away clean. If Capone owns the mayor, does he own the people of the city also? Do the people have any right? Because, you know, remember back at the Tammany Hall stuff, when Roosevelt came into office, Tammany Hall was so corrupt, they picked everybody that was coming into office, and the elections were fixed and rigged, and they could always prevail. So if you remember, part of the way that he came into power was breaking the back of Tammany Hall, these fixed elections, these clubs, these elites. And the question is, are we able, even after the fact, to pull the fat out of the fryer, if you will? And how would that be done? You know, in the Bible, the 17th book of the Bible is the book of Esther. And in the book of Esther, Haman had gotten on the good side of the king of Persia. And the king trusted him so much. He was such a good friend. They were drinking buddies and always had great ideas for the king. And so he always made sure the best harem girls showed up at harem girl house. And so he was a very good buddy of the king. And so the king trusted him so much, he gave him his signet ring and said, you know, anything I need to do to run the country, you just go ahead and take care of it, because I'm so preoccupied with all the harem girls and I like my alcohol and like that I trust you. You just take care of stuff. Well, Haman was an evil man, but he had gained the trust of the king. So he hated the Jews. He was an Amalekite, and the history on the Amalekites was that they were the first ones when the children of Abraham left slavery in Egypt, and they went out and were crossing the desert and got into the Sinai. Remember that the Egyptians had bestowed on them all of their gold, all their riches and jewels. Just get out of here. Leave us. The plagues are so horrible. Just leave. The Jews actually didn't want to leave at the time. The children of Abraham kind of liked their slavery. But God had a different plan for them. And so the Egyptians literally had to bribe them to leave slavery. So as they're going out across the desert with all this treasure, the Amalekites saw that they weren't an army. They were just a loose band of people. And they attacked the children of Abraham on their flanks, which is where the women and children were. The people were moving a little bit slower, and they were more vulnerable there. And so that was the first attack on the nation of Israel as they left Egypt. They ultimately prevailed because Joshua and Caleb held up the arms of Moses. And while he was praying and the battle went for him, if his arms started to fall, then the battle would go against him. But they prevailed. And then there was a curse against the Amalekites. It's said amongst the rabbis that the last battle against Israel will also be from the Amalekites. And it was the first and the last that would happen there. But there was a treasure to be got, and they thought that they could get it because these people weren't organized, coordinated, didn't have a place to go. They were vulnerable. In this situation we're in right now, we started out in a very real sense, this spiritual war that we're in with President Trump, trying to leave some of the bondages and slavery that have been imposed on us as a people, and trying to throw off some of these yokes that have been placed on us over decades and centuries, leaving Egypt. And suddenly this other tribe wants to come in and steal that wealth, a rising stock market, a dollar that's coming back, the economy, jobs, our freedoms, impose this, mask and vaccines and internal passports in America back on America. It's been said that the name Kamala is an anagram of Amalek. And so there's a lot of symbology here that arguably could have some meaning. But the question is, if the vote is a fraud, if the vote is not accurate, if the vote is somehow as a digital Pearl Harbor, an attack on America from outside the U.S. borders by enemies of America, colluding and coordinating their actions against us, is it a legal vote? The fact that you would even question such a thing, one of the amazing things that's happened here, and everybody in this audience knows it, if you say that we have a vote that is somehow stolen, then you can be deplatformed. You can be unable to talk. Your right to say such a thing is stolen from you.
It's beyond question, or supposed to be beyond question,
right?
At this point. Let me ask you a question real quick, Juan. A lot of people sort of this is a unique thing, I think, in history, where a lot of people sort of ended up in the same room by entering different doors.
Mm-hmm.
There's people in the church community, prophetic words that have been declared maybe even back in 11, 12, 13, concerning, 45, concerning multiple terms for 45. There's people that more in the, intelligence world and that side of just like, okay, there's a psyop in place as well, and there's a strategy, trust the plan, kind of a way of entering the room. You mentioned 17 earlier, so there's people that came in that way. There's people that ended up in the same place of like that don't maybe have a grid for each other, but have a very clear picture that like, okay, this was going to be a more than one term situation for 45, and amazingly, on the November 4th and November 8th and so forth, that stayed the same and clear up until now. It's amazing that there are millions and millions and millions of people that are like, this is going to get corrected.
Still
this is
yeah.
the fraud that's here is going to be taken and put it on the table, and it's going to be exposed. We don't want to win an election we didn't earn. But a lot of people are like, there's some things that have been suppressed that need to be seen for us to trust this process. Where do you find yourself in that mix of holding onto your towel, throwing in your towel, tying the towel around your hand, taking the towel, put it in your pocket? Where in your observational role and with the access to information that you've seen through this whole process, is this done? When will it be done? Has it been done for a long time? Will it, what's your opinion on the two team?
I did a number of presentations over the last year and a half. One of them I did back early in the summer was one with Jennifer Mack. She has a website, Choose This Day. And it's about near-death experiences. And in the course of that presentation, I mentioned to everyone, this is, 9 months ago, that this election and the time afterwards would be an NDE, a near-death experience for America, that we would look back on this moment in time like an NDE. And one thing about people who've had a near-death experience, you can have a near-death experience that's a heavenly experience, and you can have one that's a hellish experience. Mm-hmm. And this is very important. Either way, when people are allowed that gift, that ministry even, of coming back and reporting what they saw, what happened, they tell you that the experience itself was more real than the physical world, that the colors were more vibrant, the pain or the beauty was much more intense than you have even in this world. That near-death experience, even for us as a nation right now, I can tell you that the comments I'm getting, the questions I'm getting from friends, associates, political, military, business, pretty uniformly are almost anti-President Trump at this point in time for not doing something sooner, for not taking action in a particular way, for missing opportunities. They have, really almost attacked him for having not done what they knew should be done, had to be done, could be done to save everything, to turn this around. And so, we've been played. Those people that I've shared with over this long period of time, one of the last notes that I saw just before we started the broadcast was from a person that most everybody in the audience would know, and said, we've been played, and we dropped our guard, and we thought the president was going to take care of this, and we were on the right track. And so we just stood by and trust the plan and like that. And now it's over. We're toast. We're done. We're history. We've had this history where, from a Christian, scriptural standpoint, Christ himself, here, the apostles walked with him for these many years, saw the miracles, saw what his teaching, saw what he taught, experienced it themselves, had personal miracles that were done right there when they went out and ministered, went out by two ahead of where Christ was going and did miracles in his name. And yet what happened as Christ was going through his trial?
Scattered
Peter,
like
scattered. They were in denial. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Peter, who was this very impetuous disciple, he was always, rah, 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 rah. He's, yes, Lord, I'm going to do this. And yes, I'm going to do that. He was the first one for everything, got an assignment, and Peter's the first one with his hand up. I got it.
I think they were all Republicans because they were really good guys. They were attracted to the cause. They were doing the right thing. And then they wilted like a flower in the hot sun.
Well, and Peter, he denied even knowing Christ.
Yes.
3 times in the course of that. There's the story, and it even goes to what I just did here just prior to all of this and what the nation did on March 6th. It's a story that is unique in the New Testament because this woman came to Christ, and she had a very expensive jar of oil. It was called spikenard. And literally, it would go for about a year's wages. And so she broke this very expensive jar while Christ was reclining at the table with his apostles. And then she anointed his head, and then she anointed his feet. And then she wiped his feet with her own hair. She didn't do that, just like, because this is done every day. This was something that was completely unique, unusual. This was a fragrant oil. It was an anointing oil. It was occasionally used to anoint bodies prior to burial, because of course the body would start to stink pretty quickly, and so they'd bury him in caves, expensive caves or underground vaults and things like that. It was the custom of the time, and then the rot wouldn't have a stink to it as the body was decaying and going back to dust. And so she was using this and anointing Christ. And the apostles were all kind of shocked. Judas Iscariot saw this and he says, "What a waste! That is a horrible waste. Do you realize that's a year's wages? You just wasted a year's wages anointing him with this oil. You could have got a cheaper oil. It didn't have to be this expensive stuff. I mean, what's the purpose here?"
Of course, he was the treasurer. He was the one in charge of the money box.
And that was a fantastic Judas impersonation too.
That was really good.
Well, but you have to think about this. The scripture says, "For he held the bag."
Yeah.
Now, why is that important? Because when the people gave offerings, they would be there, and it was so that Christ and this entourage of about 100 people that would travel with them, the apostles and their extended families and some, hangers-on, might have spiked to 200 at times or something, and been less at other times. But they're traveling along, and they're not running their regular businesses or whatever. So they had an offering bag that people would put an offering in to support the prophet as he traveled the land and spoke and gave these truths out. And so the one that was in charge of that had kind of sought out the role was Judas, because it wasn't so much that he was necessarily stealing from the bag, but he liked the honor that he was the one, when the apostles had to go get bread or meat, when they had to get a garment, fresh socks, whatever it was, they had to come to him and get the money out of the bag for what they were doing. So he held the bag. It was as though it was his money. It wasn't his money. He was just the one that was holding it on everybody else's behalf, and he didn't make the money. It was gifts from other people, but because he held the bag, it was though it was his money to decide who got it and who didn't and how they were going to use it. And well, I don't know if that's really a good idea here. I don't know that we need, that bread sounds a little pricey to me. Can we get a better deal today? I mean, for he held the bag. And when this expensive ointment was poured over Christ, that was a year's wages. Do you know what Judas accepted for betraying Christ?
Like
30 pieces
of silver.
About a month's wages.
Wow.
1/10. He got the 10th for betrayal. He was upset about the oil. He was so upset that he just, if they don't care about me this much, and that money could have gone in the bag and I could have been managing it and everything else, fine, I'm done. I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. It's over. I'm not, he betrayed Christ for 30 pieces of silver. This moment that we're in, one interesting thing, one beautiful thing, one amazing thing that happened was this January 6th event. And all these beautiful supporters of the president came and stood and made their presence known, put their feet down on this soil here at this centerpiece of the nation, mm-hmm. and supported the president. It was almost like an anointing oil on his work, his time here. They tried to befoul it with this staged break-in at the Capitol with Antifa and BLM. And of course, we had people that had infiltrated that, and there was the laptops that were taken, and that was something else. So there's truths to be revealed at some point in time related to that. But at the end of the day, there was this beautiful event that occurred. Now, to me, that was like a type of an anointing oil for the nation. This preparation for the nation to see what was really like. And if you go look at the video that Jennifer and Mac and I made, the movie over the last month, prior to that event, the last scenes in that movie are all the people coming back from the Capitol, blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks, about 14 blocks of the crowd coming back from the Capitol. There's no angst. There's no weeping and gnashing of teeth. The people were singing. They were, there was a woman that was there, and she had a huge speaker set up, and she was saying the Lord's Prayer over that for the whole crowd. There was other people
blowing them and blessing the nation, and it was
God bless America. Yeah, it was.
They were carrying signs, Jesus 2020.
Yep.
So many things. That was a very, I think, God-inspired crowd that came there as God's representatives, this anointing oil for the nation at this critical moment. And what happened when the woman anointed Christ and Judas made his statement that, treated this as though it was a vile move to waste this ointment that could be sold and the money put into the bag, and then I could distribute it to the poor, those that really need it.
He put his own spin on it too, yeah.
You maybe not. I could have looked really good to all the poor people, giving this money out on your behalf, and you didn't have her sell that. You let her waste it on you like that. That's stupid. All these people that came out knew the election was lost, knew that this is over with, Biden's coming in, and allowed these people to spend their time and their money coming out there and making this huge demonstration for America, but in part also for the president. And it was said by Christ at that moment to leave her alone, because as long as the gospel is preached, wherever it goes, it will always be accompanied with the story of what this woman has done right here. We as a country, as I said a minute ago, had this moment to choose. This choose this day presentation I did, a heaven or a hellish experience as a nation. We are having a hellish experience. It's very real. It's horrid. You're seeing what your nation would look like under these people's rule and command if they were able to hold power. And the question is, will we, like Lazarus, rise from the dead out of this? Will there be some miracle that's outside of human control, human endeavor? Is something yet going to happen when all hope is lost? And if you remember the story of Lazarus, he was dead, but Christ continued to minister for a time. He didn't leave immediately when he was sick. And there was people complaining, you could have come and saved him if you got here soon enough. You could have healed him before he died. Why didn't you come sooner? And he tarried. And Lazarus is already dead. He's gone. It's too late. You can't get him. There's nothing can be done now. Christ, what were you thinking? You've healed all these people, and you could have healed him before he died. And now it's too late. And it's all your fault. That's this moment
that
we're in. Where's your faith? And by the way, you can't get to justice through the justice system. It's totally bought and paid for. You can't get to justice through the political system. It's totally bought and paid for at this point in time. It's controlled. What's left? You have a citizen army. And the question is that army capable of taking control back from Capone, from Capone's mob, from Capone's army? Is that even appropriate? Or should we just let the bank robbers, they got around the corner, they're in the car, they're off the bank property. It was fair and square. You didn't get there in time. You didn't stop them in time. They got the money. It's theirs. You got to stop. Who will be valiant for justice' sake?
I really like what you were saying earlier, where you've been talking to people that were discouraged and feel like Trump, has really let them down. When I really look at this, I think, if Trump would have done something, it would have come in and look really like a dictator, for a lot of the country. And again, our country would continue to be divided. And I think what you said earlier, and I remember in our conversation last night, that this will have to be divine. This is going to have to be a miracle, because that's really the only way that this country, I think, is going to come back together. It is a Red Sea moment, that God is going to part the Red Sea and we're going to walk across on dry land. And I think that's really important. And as conservatives, as Christians, it's our job to continue to hold our peace, hold the line, continue to pray with expectation in our heart of what God is going to do. And it's an exciting time to be alive.
Let me add one thing. You mentioned the Red Sea. Why wasn't Moses allowed to go into the Promised Land? What had he done?
Struck a rock.
Yep. And
right.
He was to speak to the rock.
Disobeyed, blew his temper.
Disobeyed. He lost his temper and he struck the rock with the rod, as opposed to speaking to it.
Yep.
What are we going to do as a people, as a country? Are we going to similarly be denied going into the Promised Land because we suddenly get violent, do exactly what the bad guys want us to do?
Exactly.
To somehow, go out there and we're gonna fix this problem? Or are we going to speak to the problem? I'm going to pray about it. Are we going to ask God for some kind of a divine act to save us? Now, there's plenty of people that would say, well, that is just stupid. Your prayers don't mean anything. It's just talk. God isn't there for you. Okay, well, then we're done. Because even if you act without God's blessing, you're not going to get it. We're at this critical moment. This is about a fight, not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of darkness in high places.
Yes.
So are we going to, in the flesh, be able to dethrone these entities, these spirits, these demons that control our country? One of the things that I think is very important, people have to remember, I've spoken of it frequently, I talk about it in my book. This city here is actually one great big huge religious temple. It is a complex. It's as religious in its origins and its meaning as the Vatican is. It's as religious as Mecca. You think I'm kidding? What's the centerpiece of this whole city? I've said it over and over, but people need to hear it over and over and over. The obelisk. The obelisk.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament, what was the problem when Ezekiel was shown what was going on inside the temple grounds? He was brought in the spirit and he saw the priests, and the priests were bowing down to the rising sun, and they were sticking their asses towards the throne, the seat of God. They were bowing down to the rising sun. Why? Because the rising sun is Horus. That was the Babylonian religion. That was the Egyptian religion. They left Egypt physically and brought the gods of Egypt with them. They went to Canaan land, which God had cursed and wanted destroyed because it was an affront to him. And what did they do? Adopted the gods in Canaan land. And what were those gods? Baal and Moloch, who required that you offered your children as a sacrifice in order to have a good harvest, in order to have wealth, in order to have, substance.
Yeah. One nation under God, started in the beginning based on biblical principles, but numerology and uh, occultic symbols infiltrated the city from the very first blueprint, the very first layout when they relocated there.
Yeah, just like building a golden calf, man. They didn't. The Israelites didn't make it very long before they were building a golden calf.
Definitely brought the European gods and the masonry and those things into the city for sure. I think that could be a 2-hour documentary, just monument by monument.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is this: inside the temple grounds, what was also there, they had their tower gods. Their tower gods. What are those? It's the same thing you have here in Washington. These monoliths. What is the meaning of these monoliths? What's their history? The history is that according to the religion of which Washington is built around, by the way, this religious city, according to their religion, the god Osiris was a very evil, wicked god. And his brother Set was a very good, kind, protector of good and righteousness and whatever. And they had the same mother. They were twins. And their mother was Isis. Where have you heard that name a million times before? And Isis had been impregnated by Zeus, and she had these 2 children. So Set decided to kill his brother. Sound like another story you've heard somewhere, but this time in reverse. Set decided to kill Osiris, and then he chopped him into 14 pieces and scattered the pieces across the earth. And then when Isis found this out on the same day, it was the 17th of the first month of the year when this happened, when Isis, the mother, found out that the one brother had killed the other brother, she raced out across the whole earth, because these are all gods, and she found 13 of the 14 pieces of his body, and she assembled them together. And the 14th piece she couldn't find because a fish had eaten it. Okay. So what was the 14th piece? His penis. So she fashioned a penis out of stone, and then she had sex with her dead son's corpse, this dildo. And then she supposedly got pregnant. There's a lot of religious overtones. There's also a lot of modern day overtones, because a stone is just what? It's just sand. It's just highly compressed silica. What are computer chips made out of, by the way?
Silicon.
Silicon. Okay. A hybrid of silicon and flesh. These computers that are being used to reign and rule over the earth. The morphing of machine and human flesh together. But Osiris's corpse supposedly impregnates his mother through this stone. And she has a child, and that child is who? It's Horus, the rising sun, who brings life to the planet. And those were the people that the priests of God in Jerusalem were bowing to, the rising sun, and sticking their asses in the face of God right there in God's temple.
Well, and
that was the children of God doing that.
That occultic symbology, though, that's so prevalent in today's music videos. That's so prevalent in specific artists that are being brought in, as we speak, to celebrate this shifting of leadership. Those occultic symbols are something that are celebrated and embraced. And you used the term religion, but that's not to be used lightly. Sometimes we overlook that stuff and you think, oh, that's just in a movie, or they're just playing. When you see a Katy Perry video, or some of these things, you see some of these artists, but that's really embraced, by a lot of the leadership in that town that you're visiting, and it's probably why you don't live there.
Well, in fact, again, the whole city, the centerpiece of the city, is this monument. Now, in the story of Jehu in the Bible, in 2 Kings, I think it applies here to what we have going on right now. Jehu, interesting character all by himself. He was a general in the army, And there had been this fracturing of the kingdom, a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. And by the way, just as a teaser for your audience, did you know that we've had 2 presidents at one time here in America? That was back at Jefferson Davis and Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about the president should have signed the Insurrection Act. Why didn't he? When was it last signed?
Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln. And that was during what? A time when we had 2 presidents at the same time. Did President Trump ever concede the election?
No, I didn't hear him say it one time.
You know what Lynn Wood put out today? I haven't seen any proof that it's true, but it's an interesting thing, and I think it's probably true. The letter that President Trump left on his desk when he left his office, oftentimes it's a practice, the president leaves a letter for the next president on his desk. You know what the letter left on his desk, according to what Lynn Wood presented today, what that letter said to incoming President Biden?
I don't know. I haven't heard, but maybe like you're welcome for me not spying on you. You can thank me later.
Joe, you know, I won.
Wow.
And so even now, even in the farewell address yesterday, and I'll come back to that in a minute, the president never conceded the election. He just said, I won. He's never acknowledged that the election was a done deal.
Mm-hmm.
He never accepted the results, even though he's stepped away and gone to Mar-a-Lago and handed over the keys to everything. But Jehu in the Bible, the prophet, I believe it was Elijah or Elisha, I can't remember which one it was now. He gets a word from God that something's supposed to be done. And so, he's got a bunch of kids around there that, hang out with the prophet and they're, doing ministry and all that. And so, you got some that are a little swifter and faster and pay attention better, and some that are a little bit slower. So he calls over one of them that's, they have little track meets and exercise out there at, the prophet house every couple of days. And so the one that seems to be the fastest on his feet, by the way, I'll tell you, I had a friend that he got drafted back in Vietnam, but instead of waiting for the draft to actually hit him because he had a low draft number, he went ahead and joined the Army, went to basic. And the last day of regular basic training, they said, okay, last big shot, you can go out there and impress me with how good you are. We're going to have a run. It's a 5-mile run. And first one back gets a 5-day pass. The next 3 of you get a weekend pass. And so a couple hundred guys take off and, go. And they go off running. Well, of course, my friend, he was a state track star. Held a state championship record in high school. And so, he's not even sweating it. He goes out and blows the doors off of everybody, gets back, he gets his 5-day pass. In the Army, every time they do something, they've got an ulterior motive. So what's he get? A 5-day pass because he has to go from one coast to the opposite coast because he's going to be a Green Beret training. He needs the 5 days to travel.
Oh my goodness.
And he gets out there. And of course, that's a whole nother story in there. But so the prophet, he's got his fastest runner. He gets a message from God. Oh crap, I got to get this out and I got to do this right away. So he gets the kid that's the fastest runner in the camp. Okay, you've shown me how fast you can run the errands and get stuff. And when I say, so I'm giving you an assignment, it's right straight from God. So here's what you got to do. You go find General Jehu, and here's a box. And in this box, there's a jar. And when you get there, you crack it over his head and you tell him this. And then he sends him off. So the kid gets there, and the general's there. They're having a card game, having a little whiskey. They're, talking it up. They've had a few little victories here and there. And one of the guard people out at the door comes in and says, "Hey, General Jehu, the prophet sent one of his kids over here. He has a message for you. He wants you to step outside so he can give you the message." So he steps out over on the corner, and what's up? What's the prophet got for you? What's he want to tell me? And so the kid cracks open the box, anoints the top of the general's head with oil, and says, "You are now the king of Israel, and that's from God, according to the prophet." And then the kid turns on his heels and runs as fast as he can go, because the prophet told him, as soon as you crack the jar over his head, run for your life, because all hell is going to break loose. And he does. He doesn't let the screen door hit him on the ass on the way out. Boom, vominos, and he's gone. Okay. Well, yeah, all hell did break loose, because there was this big fight within the camps who's going to be in charge. And Jehu had been anointed by God. And Jehu had an interesting series of events that happened where they went and got Jezebel and the king there that was this evil other king. And they were just horrible, scandalous, and threw her off the second floor balcony, and she landed and died, and then the dogs ate her, and there was all this significance to that. But the other thing he does, he goes to this particular city where Baal is worshipped, and then he says, "I proclaim as king that there be a sacrifice to Baal, and anybody who's a Baal worshiper must be here for the sacrifice. And anybody who isn't here for the sacrifice is sentenced to immediate death. Go tell all the Baal worshipers they must be here under threat of death." So, okay, yeah, we're going to have a sacrifice to Baal. Well, we're Baal worshipers, we definitely got to be there for that. It's going to be fantastic. And so he declares this great big huge sacrifice to Baal. Everybody shows up, and they all get in there. And then Jehu says, "I want to verify there's not one person here who is not a true devotee to Baal. Let no other persons be here inside the temple. This is a sacrifice to Baal. We don't want anybody else polluting the premises." And so they verify. The head of the guard verifies there's nobody there inside the building who isn't isn't a worshiper of Baal and a true devotee. And then as soon as they get that, they got all the doors locked so they can have this great ceremony. And then the king orders his guard, who are all around the building in the city, to go in. Let not one man escape. If one man escapes, the person who lets him loose, his life will be required of him. And they go in and they kill them all. Well, these were evil people. They were sacrificing children. Mm-hmm. This was a horrible crowd. And God gave Jehu this mission. Now, Jehu wasn't a perfect guy. He, in fact, later allowed the worshiping of the golden calf you mentioned a few minutes ago. So this was not a perfect guy, but he was under the divine protection and mission from God. So he was doing something that God wanted him to do. God does oftentimes use imperfect people to do things that must be done according to his plan for whatever reasons.
Majority of the time. There's not very many people in the Bible that you'd be like, oh yeah, they led a perfect life.
Well, he is limited. He's dealing with humans. And
exactly.
So what do you got to work with? Well, I got a bunch of humans here. That's going to be tough.
Yeah, that'll be a tough one.
Like my friend Matt Mack says, he has a quote, says, "All sinners have a future and all saints have a past."
That is true.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah.
But, you think about this situation that we're in right now. It is the Purim moment. It is the Haman moment. Remember, with Haman, the book of Esther is the 17th book of the Bible. 17 is the number of victory. 17 is also this number that the Cabal uses. There's it's like 5. I use that as an example because people recognize this pretty quickly. 5 is the number of grace in the biblical narrative. grace to God's people, forgiveness, redemption. But in the occult, 5 has a separate meaning. They interpret it differently. 5 is the number of death to enemies and defense. And so the Pentagon, this building that's symbolic, that's symbolic meaning. Why does it have 5 sides? Death to enemies and defense. The fort's got 5 sides.
Mm-hmm.
It has symbolic meaning. The whole city is covered in buildings and street angles and proportions that have biblical meaning. The Washington Monument is 555 feet high. How deep is the foundation? 111. What's that add up to?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 666. It sure did.
Yeah, of course. And the Washington Monument, its number is 17. Why? Because that's the number of Osiris. It's the death and resurrection date of Osiris.
Now,
17 is the, yeah.
Well, don't you also see it? There's a feels like we're in a season of redemption of a lot of these things as well. So many things have been taken. The rainbow was a promise from God to Noah, and now it has other meanings. There's meanings with the numbers. 17's kind of had a nice little comeback for the last few years. There's Johnny Enlow did a really great talk recently on a broadcast called the Elijah List, and one of the things he was talking about was some of the numbers of even the math of the Washington Monument, and I forget exactly because I was listening to it. I want to go back and write them all down exactly, but it was intended for one thing, and then now there's a meaning for it being interpreted back for something good.
I think that's important to talk about because the enemy, Satan, is not creative. That is not what he is. He's not creative. God is the creator. He is the one that created everything. And so the only thing that the devil can do is to counterfeit. It's like if you have a $100 bill and you have a counterfeit $100 bill, it doesn't make the $100 bill bad just because there's a counterfeit, for it. And I think that's really important. And you're even talking about these numbers, just because the enemy is trying to use these numbers for bad, he's not the one that created it. God did. And so I think it is our time to take these numbers back and not allow them to be stolen or counterfeit, for sure.
And again, like you said, not even take them back like they were created from darkness and being stolen into light. They
were created from light.
They were created, used for a demonic purpose to tell a demonic story, but then now seem to be being redeemed. And I see that in lots of areas, lots of ways, lots of different categories that there's a taking back of what's been lost.
Well, let's put it this way. When a lot of these cults, this particular one that we're talking about, that runs this city, that is the cult around which Washington is built, when they talk between each other, I apologize, I had somebody call there. When they talk between each other, oftentimes they communicate using scriptures. And so it seems all good and right. Well, they quote scripture. They want the Bible to come to pass. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? Can scripture be used for evil? Didn't the devil himself, who knows the Bible cover to cover, intricately knows every verse of the Bible very well, better than we do, this archangel level genius, what did he use to tempt Christ?
First thing he tempted
Christ was scripture. He quoted scripture to Christ. But he had a twist to it. It wasn't that the scripture wasn't godly. It wasn't that the scripture wasn't divinely given. It was that it was misused, misapplied. And so even with these numbers, they try to twist the meaning. So the Osiris number 17, for any of the spells, the magic, the witchcraft, they have this thing that they magnify the power of a spell, a ritual, by 3. So it increases and magnifies their magic, their strength, the illusion. So 3 times 17, pick any number. 3 times 17, what's that?
Help us out here.
Yeah.
17 and 17 is 34.
Yeah. Plus 17.
And 34 and 17 is 51.
There you go.
Where is all of the magic, the illusion, the secrecy, the spell done for our secret space and military programs? Area 51. They use these numbers over and over and over. They have ritual meaning. 19 is the power number. So, for example, the space program, everything that NASA is doing is built around 19. Why? Because the other physics, there's an actual real reason for this. The physics that isn't taught in the listed classes at select universities around the world, the other physics that has to do with the way things work at the subatomic level, that physics is based on 19. It's actually based very precisely on the bleed out point of energy in a rotating sphere. So for example, if you take a triangle and put it in a circle, you remember the old nuclear fallout shelters, and it'd have a triangle and a circle. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look where the equator would be in a circle, think of it, instead of being two-dimensional flat, make it three-dimensional. Instead of it just being a triangle, it's actually a tetrahedron, which is a three-sided pyramidal shape, not a four-sided like you think of the Great Pyramid. A tetrahedron is three-sided. It's the simplest form of matter in 3 dimensions is what it is. So anyway, where that point on the bottom of the pyramid or a triangle would fall inside of a circle is 19.47 degrees out of a 360 degree circle. It would be 19.47 degrees below the edge of this line going across through the center that would be the equator. In fact, that's you can flip it upside down, have the point of the triangle up or down. So where's the Great Pyramid in Egypt? This monument in stone. It's 19.47 degrees off of the equator. It has to do with the energy bleed out points, the deepest point of the crust of the earth on the planet. A lot of stuff there that I could go into, but it goes to the other physics. It is the power number, and they reduce it up to 19.5, kind of halfway up, and they reduce it down because it's less than half of a whole number to 19. So they use 19 in a lot of the rituals and spells like that, and for symbolic meaning. Yesterday was Popcorn Day, the 19th day of the year, arguably 119. Well, what's 119? It's 119. That's 9/11 backwards. Popcorn Day was this reverse. They love their mirroring, their reversals. It was the reverse of 9/11. What's the significance there? It just so happens this year, 119 was 7,070 days since 9/11. In Gematria, the language of numbers, you drop the zeros. So only 77, a perfect number. It was also 1,010 weeks since 9/11. You drop the zeros, that's an 11. Why is 11 relevant? It's the number of war. It's the number of conflict. It's the number of discord. How many disciples were left after Judas betrayed Christ and then committed suicide? There was 11, and they were in discord. World War I started in a car where Prince Ferdinand was killed, and the plate on the car was a coded 11-11-11. What was the end date of World War I? World War I ended on the 11th month, the 11th day of the month, at the 11th hour of the day, 11-11-11. Why didn't they end it at midnight or at noon? I mean, who's the last guy that had to die before they stopped the war? They ended it at 11-11-11 because it had symbolic.
They want to leave these little messages to each other. They want these little winks across the bow because some of us, this occult activity, and then the messages within that is on both teams oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I gave you all of that. I have a very important thing I want you to think about. It goes both ways. The secret method of communication between all these families in the political realm all across the world is the language of numbers. For example, the whole Q thing, it's the 17th letter of the alphabet. It was a coded message, and they've been doing this coding back and forth for a very long time. Do you know that President Kennedy's grave is a boot stamp around it, and it's in the shape of a Q? Look at it from overhead. In the Daily Plaza, this ritual site where through a ritual ceremony, the president was killed and the coup against America was perfected in taking power, even of the presidency, that right there at the center of the plaza in the monument, there's an obelisk, a monument in stone, this penis, a fuck you to America. And I say that to a Christian audience because that's what they're saying. They're laughing at you because you don't get it. It's right there in front of you and you don't see it. And then they do these coded things with language of numbers. And they do their rituals. When Barack Obama was sworn in the second ceremony, because he didn't say something quite right during the official ceremony, so they did it again. And they did it in the evening in the White House. And they did it in the map room. And the person in the picture on the wall in the map room is the architect of Washington, D.C., the whole city, this Masonic architect. And there's a window. You see the picture, the official picture of President Obama, and you see the architect in the background of Washington, D.C. So that's all you see. You have to look at the White House from overhead, and then you realize, oh, there's a window over there right in front of his eyes. And what's outside the window, directly in front of the president, to his side, ahead of him, as he's swearing the oath, presidency of the United States? The obelisk. He had to say it where he could see the obelisk. He was paying homage to the obelisk. And so this language going back and forth here. When President Trump gave his farewell address yesterday, go on to YouTube, look at the official site. How many minutes long is his official address? 19. And how many seconds? 47. Did I tell you a moment ago the language of numbers? And the key number, the power number, is 1947. Do you think that was an accident?
No, it's a wink. It's the same as the note. It's a, hey Joe, I won.
Yeah.
And the question is, President Trump, will they allow him to go peacefully into the night? Do you really think that that's going to happen? Already, they're planning to go after him for all that he's done to dismantle their schemes and their concoctions, their spells, all these things. They won't let up. They won't go away. The president knows this. Do you think he was going to leave and allow his family to become their food, their sacrifice? Because they won't stop. They can't control themselves. They're having their festival, their celebration right now. And I would tell your audience that I believe that God is not done here yet. But the question is, will the people of God maintain the faith at this critical moment? And by the way, when the woman, led by the Spirit of God, did this beautiful thing of which all Christians are told, because everywhere the word goes, the good news, this act, this sacrifice that this woman did, this obedience to God in heaven, to the Spirit of God, this thing that she did is told everywhere that she goes. Why? Because she heard God and anointed Christ's body for burial. Now, I will add one thing. On the third day, other women who were also followers of Christ, who had also traveled in the caravan, brought expensive ointment. And as was the custom, they came to the grave so they could go in and anoint the body with additional ointments so that it wouldn't be suffering corruption and stink of death symbolically. But you know what happened? They got there and the stone had already been rolled away. They got to the party late to do something that was no longer relevant because Christ had already risen. They had the right idea, but timing is everything. Those people that showed up on the 6th of January came and did something that was beautiful, that was important, and showed support for the president, for everything that he did. And that's why it was so critical to put it in the movie that Jennifer Mack and I did, The Called, The Making of a Perfect Day. Give the president a little wind under his wings, a little refreshment. Why? Because I don't believe, and we will see, perhaps I'm wrong, I don't believe God's done with America. And I don't believe for a second that God is done with President Trump. And I don't believe because he hasn't actually ceded the election over. I believe he understands there's something going on here, but it won't be done by flesh and blood. It won't be by man alone. They've brought it to a certain point, and now, at the appointed moment, were we too late? Will God show up too late? Will Christ himself show up too late to pull America's fat from the fire, to raise Lazarus from the dead? Are we done? Is this over? Are we finished as a people? That's the way this audience, many of the people here are talking. That's the texts and emails that I'm getting from friends and associates. They're mad. They're mad at me. They're mad at others. They see this as missed opportunities, missed chances to do something. But I would tell you also that in the waiting till the last moment, we see who the true followers are, who the true believers are. They've shown their hand. They've shown what their alliances are. They know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Those that have disavowed this movement, this change, this rebirth of America, we're seeing how shallow or deep their real understanding, how these truths lie in their being, and what's going on. When the prophet sent the runner to anoint this king with oil and then run like hell and get the hell out of there because it's going to get wild. Has God himself done something that we haven't dialed into our equations? Is there revelations about to happen in America? And is there someone who's called by God to do something that must be done, and it can't be done politically necessarily, can't be done in the courts necessarily, and yet it must be done and will be done because God has appointed this moment, has declared something's going to happen because the people of this nation are his, not the devil's, not that tribe's, not Baal's, not Moloch's. I believe that's the case, but time will tell. I'll be the fool. I will be subject to ridicule. I've gone out on a limb. I would rather be counted with President Trump. The people that held a particular stance called these evil out. Remember when President Trump went over after the rioters had been there to St. John's Church? He didn't talk. He didn't make any big prognostications or threats or anything. He just took his Bible over, showed it to the media, stood there, made a statement. He took not just America, but the whole world to church. And he didn't have to embellish anything. He didn't have to add anything. He didn't have to make any threats. We're going to come get the people who did this, whatever. No, showed his Bible, and he returned to the White House. The whole country's going to have a church moment here, I believe, during the course of this. We'll find out.
Man, I could
And
not agree more. I have God bumps just listening to you talk because I agree. I agree. And we are called as saints and as Christians to stand in agreement with that, to have faith and declare and believe. And I think for that, there will be a reward for that. You know, we know that God rewards faith. We see that with Abraham. Abraham had faith and he was rewarded for his faith, not just him, but generations that
Mm-hmm.
came after him. And so I've said it so many times, and I think I've already said it once here, but this is the best time to be alive. We are so blessed. We were
Yes.
chosen for this time. This is the best time to be alive. What an honor for us to be here. And it's our job to stand strong, continue to pray, and believe that God has something really beautiful for our country.
And I can't help but think, Juan, as we're talking again, for those of you just kind of jumping on some of the on the live, and this will be on all the podcast platforms later. But let's, here today talking with Juan Savin, and you're seeing the view out the window. This is kind of the way that this has to be for this information. But Juan, I feel like this past year even has been a preparation. I feel like all my analogies are going to go back to either food or the gym right now, because January, Stacey and I started back in the gym, and so my whole body feels like I was dropped from a 2-story building. I don't even know the places I'm sore anymore. It's just like my earlobes feel pretty good. Other than that, it's sore. But I feel like as a nation, we'd probably gotten soft. As a nation, we'd become very flabby. But in the gym, the process of doing hard things, it's like, oh, this is increased strain and stress on my body. And by doing it, I almost feel like spiritually stronger walking out of there. It's like I'm attacking each task throughout my day with a new vigor, because I'm like, I've already killed a bear. I've already killed a lion. It's like, I know I can, do this email. And so I feel like our whole country has strengthened, in 2020 with how do you discipline yourself when there's craziness on the news, there's craziness, on the streets, everything that was up is down, is down, is up. And people have had to work on their identity in themselves. What do I think? What do I believe? And I got to block out a certain amount of information that's coming in from around me. But people have had to strengthen their internal fortitude to say, what is true? What's a lie? What is right? What is wrong? Maybe I can't depend on my sources I've had in the past. I'm going to have to do my own research. I'm going to have to look this up. I'm going to have to find what the truth is. And they've learned that their city council is pretty important. They've learned their mayor is pretty important. They've learned their governor is pretty important. It's not all about one person. And through this year, I feel like we've been conditioned and strengthened and sort of chiseled in the gym to a place where it's at least possible that there's enough Americans and enough believers. There's enough people that maybe even aren't believers, but they believe you believe enough that they're willing to believe. And that strengthens us in a place where there's a unifying chord where people just feel like this is not over. And regardless of the ceremonies that have taken place,
that's by man.
Is all by man. And they let go of their little things along the way of, oh, Amy Coney Barrett's ace in the hole. Supreme Court's got this, or Pence is going to fix this for us. Or, we've really come to a place where there's no more hooks to hang your hat, but God. Everything that you would ever want for our country would come after the but God. Mm-hmm. And we're at that spot now. And I think it's fascinating to see the Hank Kunnemans and the Johnny Enlows and the Kat Kerrs and, people from the strict prophetic spiritual world coming to the same conclusions as people in the intelligence community, and coming to the same conclusions of people that got in the room, different places. They overlap on that Venn diagram, and they're saying the same thing of, I can't tell you, I can't how, but I can tell you it's not over. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be peaceful. President Trump keeps mentioning that this is going to be peaceful. It's going to be but God, not us storm, the castle or do something crazy. It's not going to be from us complaining, us being whiners. We don't descend from weak-minded men. We descend from patriots. We descend from people who fought hard to get here. And we're Americans, not Americans, and this is a time to individually clean up our own homes and get up and do the right things for our families. And believe that God is not done, and what is the next right thing that God's going to do in our country through the people who are showing up. And I definitely don't want to be the guy out in the parking lot trying to beat traffic with 2 minutes left on the game clock at a football game, and your team comes back from a deficit. I mean, why not?
You missed the whole thing. You missed the climax of the whole story.
You fought long enough. Stay there, man. Stay there till the buzzer rings and the fat lady sings. And I still don't believe that is today.
That's true. I think you couldn't say it much better than that. That's a better summation maybe than I have, because I've gone all through it. But at the end of the day, the long story, the way I say it, the short version, the way you just said, is that salvation from America, from this horrible fate that seems to be at hand, comes only from God. One thing that I would add just in closing is this. In the video that I did, Choose This Day, it's on Jennifer Mack's site. It's out in the internet, various places.
We'll link it up underneath this for all the broadcasts.
All right. In that presentation about near-death experiences, one of the common things for people who had a hellish experience was at the last possible moment, they had a similar sequence of events. They would call out to God. They would call out to Jesus. One gal who had a drug problem, and she wasn't the worst person in the world, but finds herself in the depths of hell. And, it was just horrible. And she said, she'd never had a church history, never, knew anything along those lines that way. But she remembered when she was very little, a neighbor girl had invited her to go to Bible camp, to, this summer Bible school thing. And so she remembered the song, Jesus Loves Me, and story of Christ. And so somewhere in the depths of her memory, in the midst of this unbelievable, horrible experience, she said, it was so horrible that you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. If it was a Hitler, you wouldn't wish it on them, because it was so horrible, because hell wasn't made for humans. It was made for the demons. And if you find yourself there, it wasn't ever intended by God for humans. It was so horrible. And she said, she cried out to Jesus. And in that instant, as far away, the tiniest possible light that you could imagine, suddenly she saw it in this sky area over. And then it started getting bigger, and it got bigger, and it got bigger. And all of a sudden, whoosh, and it was the angel Michael right there in front of her, and blasts this angel off out into this distance, this dark angel that had a hold of her, this demon, and takes her hand and leads her out of hell. The moment came when she realized that she was almost completely lost, but she cried out to God. She cried out to Christ, please save me. This hellish experience will be that kind of real for America. It's becoming that real for the people around us. This specific audience have to be salt and light right now. Speak truth in the darkness. Call out to God this exact second for our salvation, that we would not go into the night. This people that are here, this shining city on the hill to the world, we can't go away. This is it. We're the ones. And we need to be raised up like Lazarus from the dead to go out and help our brothers across the world, not to be our brother's keeper, to be our brother's brother. That's this moment we're in. That's the mission of this audience. That's the mission of you folks right here. And that's the future, the destiny of America that I see, that I pray for, that I believe is yet going to come, a miracle in the dark of the night, right now, not a decade away, not some future election, right now.
Man, amen.
Well, I got to, if you give us just another minute or so, I got a couple of questions I want to end on here, because, your ability to tie together Old Testament and New Testament, and a military story and a track star, and a couple funny jokes. You kind of go around twice and then tie it in a bow at the end was beautiful. I hope people caught not just the obvious things that you gave them today, but the references to dig deeper, to own this content, to own this information, to be able to then take it and share it. But I like to always end things with actionable items. Okay, what's the next right step? I think an important thing for people to think about is, if nothing gets resolved and the this new administration is there, what's the next right thing? Well, you know what? The world's still spinning. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. I got to be a great husband to my wife. I've got to be a good leader for my adult kids that are looking for me for leadership. I got to crush the activities that are in front of me and do the next right thing. I've got to use the example. I think it's Jordan Peterson, but don't worry about changing the world if you've not changed the toilet paper roll in your house. Get up, make your bed, do something positive, but don't get sucked into the complaining and the moping. If this does get fixed and tomorrow we wake up and like, whoa, that was a crazy dream. It seems so real. Those are the same things I would have to be doing. I would need to get up, be a great husband to my wife, crush the activities God's put in front of me in my business and my work, do the best things possible. What are some action items that you have for people either way right now, and to be productive, to not get into a funk, to stay strong mentally? What advice would you have for them in that category?
Well, I can't completely speak to every person in the audience. It's something where God gives you personal light in your life. Is your ministry to your own household? Is it to the neighborhood? Is it to people you work with? What's your location where you're called to do something? One person helps the neighbor fix the car. I remember a friend of mine who he wanted to go be involved in ministry overseas. And when he went to talk with the mission school that wanted to, he wanted to go with, and they said, well, one of the things that people need a lot of times in this particular area that you want to go to, they need people that can help them fix the tractor, to keep a car running or something like that. Do you have any mechanical skills? Oh, no, I've been a Bible student all my life. Well, do you know anything about farming? Nope. Do you know how wells work? Nope. You don't have any life experience. Okay. He's so heavenly minded. He's no earthly good, but I can teach the Bible really good. Well, does it apply? Even in my situation right now, one of the things that just happened in the last week, I had put something together, well over a year ago, and I wasn't super happy with a couple of the technicians that I had involved. And I thought, it's just not quite the right time. It just didn't have the right feel to it. And so even though I had put a tremendous amount of resources into it to create something to go up against head to head with Facebook, Twitter, Gab, these various platforms, and then YouTube, just didn't have the right feel to it. And even though I was pretty vested in getting to a certain point, and one of the technicians just didn't, he had genius, for real genius, but it wasn't the right guy. And so I took a deep breath, thought about it, prayed about it, and said, no, I'm and literally said, I'm going on a cruise on my boat. I'm not going to do this. Had a great trip. And one of the people around me says, man, that was a waste. You just spent all that time and money and everything else, and then you're not going to do anything. I said, well, I don't know, just in the right time, doesn't feel right. I couldn't really absolutely explain it to anybody around me. They just thought, I was, that was dumb. And then about a week and a half ago, because of everybody being deplatformed and not being able to have a place to go, one of the people that I helped behind the scenes get, his show known X22 report.
Hmm.
He was deplatformed the other day. Others, Red Pill 78, Space Shot 76, both hosts that do tremendous work and have been very important in this community. Both deplatformed, lost all of their content, had to start all over, lost a way to communicate with these large audiences they had. Our community, our ability to communicate, to have a record, a history, has been fractured, damaged seriously. So, because of a couple of different things that came up, including an ally that has the right kind of skill sets and that, I felt more comfortable with, we talked about it and decided, yep, we got to take a shot at it. So we put together a new platform that we think is going to be able to stay viable when others get taken down. We're going to be a refuge for folks to come in and have their shows live and have their archives kept, and where people can have these communications, which are going to be critical. We're being cut off from our First Amendment right, the right to communicate, to express our thoughts, to think. We aren't being allowed that. Somebody was saying, the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. Actually, I kind of think I think that's not quite true. The First Amendment, the communication, the ability to talk about what our rights are and to converse and convey those things is the most important one. And then we know how to keep our other constitutional rights. We know what rights are ours and how to protect them. That ability to communicate and it being taken away from us steadily, relentlessly by these oligarchs here in America, that's a threat to everything American. And so for myself, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I had full plate, but then again, we were close. The situation required it, so dropped everything and put together a platform. So it's called 107daily.com, and that's kind of a communications Facebook, Twitter, Gab type of a location. And then the 107 My TV is inside of that, and we'll have shows like yours and others that can be live, and also the archives. We'll get those records in there and try to help the community there as best we can, going through what may ahead of us as we stay in the fight. I don't know what is right for friends, associates, family, whatever, completely, and I'm not going to try and guess it. But I do think that God provides light and understanding with what you have, where you're at, what your tools are. And then you have this moment of decision. In my case, I had stuff available, was ready to go, but it wasn't the right time. Now it's the right time and other resources came available. I had to act. There may be things that people in your audience have thought about doing, needed to do, held off on doing, or hadn't considered, but now is the time. But at this critical second, be careful, seek guidance from God, from Christ, and don't strike the rock. Take action, but take the right action the right way at the right time, at the right location. And that's something that the light of that moment, the wisdom, the knowledge to do it the right time, the right way, that's a gift from God. Why didn't President Trump do something sooner when he still could have? Why didn't he go to help Lazarus when Lazarus needed his help and his healing at the critical moment? Because that wasn't God's plan. Was it still not God's plan that Lazarus would rise again? Would we know the story if he just healed Lazarus and not raised him from the dead? Would America value this moment, and would they see it as God himself saving us from the depths of hell, as opposed to the nurse or the technician dealing with the drug addict that's having an overdose and saving her from having a heart attack or a brain aneurysm or whatever it was would have done it? where would she have seen her help from if she'd been saved before she went unconscious and went on this trip to hell? Where will America see its salvation coming from? Oh, President Trump did this and that, and we're going to make him the new king and royal and the royal family. Or is it seen as coming from God?
Yeah.
We don't need another Camelot in America. We don't need another God king here in America. We need God himself.
Exactly.
And we're going to, you know, I think people are shocked how quickly communist ideas, socialist ideas became commonplace here. And I don't think we'll ever take that for granted again. If God's gracious enough to allow us to clean the cockroaches out of the kitchen, we'll never let this happen again. And I'll dedicate the rest of my life to banging the table, to making it loud, making it clear and made noisy, that people never forget, you know, of what can happen. We're moving our content as well too there, in addition to the other platforms we have. So in the next few days, it'll be on 107 daily as well. Is there a significance to the number 107 to be the platform name?
There is, yeah. And 107 is something that I've published under and been known by for decades. And so, yeah, there is some significance there. At some point, I'll probably talk about it more deeply.
That sounds great.
Perfect. Well, I'm happy with that. And I'll take that as at least a partial promise that you'll come back on here on the Flyover Conservatives podcast with us in the future. Guys, we're going to link up everything on flyoverconservatives.com as well as the call notes beneath this in the YouTube, in the Apple Podcast, Spotify, everywhere this is available. The references to today, websites, links, as well as how to find Juan's book that he's written over this past year as kind of almost a prophetic declaration, explaining the situation that we're in right now and what's going to be coming from it. So you're going to want to actually grab the book and take a look at that.
Thank you, Juan.
Well, and let me just add one thing there too. We've had just a brutal time on the mailing. We send it out U.S. Postal Service. That agreement contract with the print company is kind of in place, and we're just about to shut that down. Holding a bunch of books back because of books that haven't been delivered, waiting for the dust to settle to make sure that the book as printed in this first edition is printed as the victory edition for President Trump, presidential victory edition. And so we had a limited number that were printed. They did a first half of the printing, but there wasn't enough paper of the type that we used to complete it. And then they had a problem with the binding because it's such a large book that the method of binding, it actually broke the binder. And so they repaired it twice, and then they finally had to do something completely different, and that got done. And so they actually finished the print like 3.5 weeks later than they promised, even after they promised earlier. So all of the books that had been ordered up to Christmas time were sent out. The ones that had been ordered since then, they just now are going to leave. And then the postal system, of course, was slow during the Christmas stuff. We're still getting reports now of people getting their books that were ordered all the way back in late October. It's very grinding for me. It's been very painful for people. And there's a long story behind all of that. But it's, the COVID and everything else. You had mail processing centers that shut down, a couple of them several times, because every time somebody would show up with COVID, they'd shut down for 14 days.
Oh, no.
And so the mail, the stories that we got from, various people in the post office of these things are just, it's like, really? Are you kidding me? In fact, I was talking with a friend of mine earlier today, and he just got word from one of his clients that Christmas cards they mailed on December 1st just got to their offices, and their offices are only like about 20 miles apart.
Oh my gosh.
And so they just got their Christmas cards. And our book is hard for them to do. But the reason I say all of that in part is here in the next few days, we're going to cut that off and not sell any more of those. I'm going to hold back enough so that I can cover anybody that didn't get their book that they ordered. It is kind of a statement. The Trump election victory edition, it actually has a large picture of President Trump on the back cover, which might be part of the problem because some of them were sent out in clear plastic packages, and the post office people are heavily weighted towards the Democrat side, so I may have to replace a lot of books here. So in the next week or two, the dust we'll have to make the decision to do some remailing, but
I am celebrating a
me.
victory for Trump. I'm celebrating. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to get into it right now, but I've got my Trump socks on today. I do, and I'm not ashamed. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I couldn't explain the detail. I know that I'm not trying to find a bucket of ballots somewhere. I'm just trying for the truth to be revealed.
Yes.
I think we know that it was a landslide, and I think that it's going to be exposed. And I want the victory edition of The Kid by the Side of the Road by Juan Savin. I want the victory edition because I'm in victory mode. We're eating cake. We're celebrating, blowing kazoos, eating popcorn. This was a big win. And I had a thought while you were talking. I'm going to put this in the notes as well. I'd like to get the address where people could send a thank you card to President Trump. Right now, I think even if he got it, within the next week, something you appreciated for what he's done this year, something that's impacted your family. If you were, impacted by the right to try, or you're impacted by prison reform, you're impacted by just not paying a stupid $1,000 insurance fee, or, any number of things. Let's thank him now and keep the wind in his sails, like you said earlier. So I'll find out exactly how to do that. And I just encourage the listeners, the Flyover Conservative Podcast, let's just dump cards in his lap.
For sure.
Well, and one other thing, let me just add this, the movie that Jennifer Mack and I did, and she did a stunning job of editing and compiling. She's an amazing filmmaker. But The Called, The Making for a Perfect Day. Perfect Day is a presentation I did over a year ago. I had my perfect days a couple of times and some others, and I talk about that. And the president really needs his perfect day right now, but we as a country need our perfect day. And so that movie is really about the need for this perfect day for the president and for us as a country. I wish your people would go watch it. I didn't plan when we released it that we'd have my own site, so I don't think I have to worry about it going anywhere. We'll post it on my own site here in the next day or so, as soon as the MyTV site is up. And we have, by the way, amazing amount of space. We can do about a third of what YouTube can do right now as soon as we go live, so it'll be amazing. But the long and short of it is that video you can find it on YouTube, you can find it on Rumble. I think it will minister to the spirits of those people that would go listen to it, and that would help them to understand this moment we're in, their need to be a part of it, not just for the president, but for the whole country. The whole country needs this perfect day. And a card, a note to the president at Mar-a-Lago. Wow, what a beautiful gesture. We love you. Thank you.
That's what I'm postcard. Send postcard with a big hay bale in it from Iowa.
Yeah.
And just say thank you for what you did. I'm moved by the fact of our country's more prosperous, our people are more prosperous, and he is less prosperous than he was 4 years ago.
He left the country better than he found it.
Very unique, very unique. Past presidents, many left the country worse off, and they were better off. So we owe him a great debt, and I don't think his work is finished. Stacey, want to bless us and knock us out?
I do, actually. And as we were sitting here, I just was looking at our cup, which is Joshua. It's actually Joshua 1:9. It says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go."
Come on.
And I thought, what a great way to close out. Juan, we just really appreciate your time, your expertise. And audience, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we just encourage you, truly, that your future is better than the past. That God's in control. God's not on the throne chewing his nails right now. He's not nervous. He has a plan, and we've got a really good Father. So keep declaring and keep praying. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great day. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Flyover Conservatives podcast with David and Stacey Whited. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave us a comment below. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's podcast, share with those who came to mind. Be blessed and make it a great day.